Well, welcome everyone to On the Offense. This is our 11th podcast since going back to last November. We're really excited about today's edition. As you know, we normally take a timely or otherwise newsworthy topic and dissect it from a marketing and communications perspective. We're certainly going to do that today. But before we do that, we do hope everyone had a good Passover and Easter. Both of those periods are now past us. We are recording this on Easter Monday. And we do want to say rest in peace to Pope Francis, who passed away this morning. We all found out about it here in the United States when we woke up, but he had passed away earlier in the morning in his home at the Vatican. And so I certainly feel his loss. I am not Catholic, but I did go to a Jesuit high school, and he was a Jesuit. In fact, I think the first Jesuit to be Pope. I think that's true. And so I always, even that's surprising, isn't it? But I think I read that. And so I always, even as a non-Catholic, felt a pull to him. And so I'm feeling his loss, as is the world. So today we are thrilled. You can see an extra face here as compared to the norm, that we are featuring a guest for the third time. We're really excited about the discussion we're going to have, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Baum, to introduce our guest. Jeff, over to you.
Yes. And I'm excited about today's broadcast because it really is topical. As all of you who are listening or watching know, the U.S. is going through a huge transitional period, which has, provided quite a bit of uncertainty and pain and really adjusted the view of the world towards us. I don't know if you followed the stock market, but we're down another 1,000 points on the Dow today. We've gone from 44,000 down to 37,000s now. So that is a lot of money.
Not good.
It's a lot of equity out of the market.
Not good.
And, we have a 10% tariff on everyone in the world. And, this idea of retaliatory tariffs. I mean, it's really a time of the unknown. And we are exceptionally pleased to have a guest on our program today. This is Malcolm George, who back in our EDS days were, John, I think you were already gone, but Malcolm was in charge of our government affairs in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. He served that same role at a couple of other companies and is well known in that community. And he's certainly global in his opinions. And he looks very relaxed in his setting in France now. So, Malcolm, I turn it over to you. Just, give us a little background on yourself, and then we can launch in with the hard questions.
Welcome, Malcolm.
Thank you. And really great to join you. Great to have worked with you in the past. And I can say the guys at EDS shaped my career, whether it was EDS, then with HP running Europe, and in Dell, where I was lucky enough to lead Europe, and then also in the Far East, in India and Singapore, Malaysia, and get a feel for work over there. So a broad feel. And I think, looking at changes now in the world we live in, and so much happening in the world, I'm lucky enough to have a bit of distance from it now, which maybe gives me a bit different perspective and allows me to stand back a bit from being at the cold face of doing government affairs and maybe just have a slightly broader view. And, just chatting to you guys is really why I'm on the call, because it's always been interesting exchanging ideas with you guys.
You do look relaxed, I will say that.
Yeah, it's living in France. I'm very close to the vineyards. We worry eternally about frost at this time of year, but the temperatures have held up, so maybe a decent vintage. You never know. We might get some good wine this year.
We are looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're going to have to pay a huge tariff. You'll have to pay a huge
Because a
tariff, and that'll
lot
be passed
of
along to us.
it kind of counters the tariff. So you have to hope there's a lot of it and prices dip a bit naturally.
I like that. I like
This
that.
this
Yeah.
is a product, Jeff, for which I will pay extra.
Of course, yeah, the law of supply and demand, that's definitely in place here. And, some little tariffs slapped upon the people in Europe, it's not gonna affect me unless it's over the top. So anyway, let's start out. I mean, from your perspective, Malcolm, how has the view of the U.S. in the U because Malcolm's from London. He worked out of London recently, or 3 years ago, I guess, relocated to France. But what's the perception of the U.S. in the UK and then separately in continental Europe? Can you give us
Yeah,
how has it evolved?
that distinction's worth making, I think, Jeff. The UK left the European Union through Brexit. And so the perceptions are slightly different between continental Europe within the EU and the UK post-Brexit. Across Europe, I think if you look at the big issues that are impacting the US, the ones that have played the loudest and have probably had the most focus have been very much the Ukraine and then tariffs. Looking at the other stuff that I think is very much occupying US minds, then maybe playing at a bit lower volume, if you like, it's probably the legal and university issues, and to an extent, the immigration issues. It's just simply that thing that what directly impacts you and what's directly impacted Europe has been Ukraine and tariffs, and maybe less so more domestic issues haven't played as loud. They're still getting talked about, but they're just not occupying the man in the streets view of the US. Approaches on both issues slightly different. I think there's a harmonized view around the Ukraine issue. Britain's broadly aligned with France and Germany and Poland and the Baltics that it's been brought to attention, these countries have to pay more money for defense. All of us do. We've had a bit of a free ride for a while. And I think there's actually oddly a common support for that. Maybe if it could have been done in a way that was a bit less of an abrupt shock, that would have helped. But Europe's pretty much aligned, and you can see measures being taken to increase defense spending, and it's a big focus. Tariffs is where the distinction comes. The UK being outside Brexit, relatively new government, 7-8 months in now, real problems on growth in the economy, has adopted what I think you would best describe as a very conciliatory approach to the States. Invitation to meet the king, very much highlighting there aren't great trade imbalances, and fundamentally looking for the sort of trade deal that could help the UK economy when the government's struggling to get growth and struggling to get growth in the economy. Europe's slightly different. I mean, Europe's going to negotiate as a trade bloc. Individual prime ministers don't have the right to do trade deals. It will be negotiated from Brussels by Ursula von der Leyen. And I think, whereas you could caricature the UK as in a slightly weak position, the European Union is a very significant bloc, and they will maybe take a less conciliatory approach to the United States. And that could be a much rougher, I think, negotiation than is potentially in place for the UK. And we'll see how that goes. It's making big news here, obviously both issues, and it's affecting public opinion. But again, I would say some of the surveys I've seen the YouGov poll recently, it'd be incorrect to portray it as some sort of Americans not welcome, we're putting up the barriers. A lot of the issues that the Trump administration is addressing are ones that apply in Europe. And a lot of the most popular political parties in Europe and the UK are actually very similar in outlook to the policies Donald Trump is putting forward. So you look at the UK and the Reform Party, currently tied in the lead in the UK. Italy has a coalition that is fundamentally a populist right-wing coalition. Obviously, Orban in Hungary, but also the popular right in Germany is doing well. In the Netherlands is significant force. Spain has populism. So it's not as if we're looking, I think Europe is looking on askance, what is happening in the US. I think quite the opposite. I think there is an acknowledgement and understanding that, if not support for, but acknowledgement and understanding that the pressures and the decisions that have been made in the States are actually securing popular support in Europe as well.
Interesting. John, any questions come to mind, especially from the marketing angle?
Yeah, boy, my mind is racing based on everything you just said, Malcolm. It is interesting to hear that, it's not like everyone in Europe is looking at the US saying we've lost our marbles, right? Doesn't sound like that's the case. How about the media coverage? When you say that there's a certain understanding of what Trump is doing, is that from a leadership perspective, politician perspective, I suppose, and to what extent is that mirrored in media coverage? Is the U.S. getting raked over the coals in the press, or is it more moderated, or what?
I think, again, it's more nuanced. I think what has caused surprise some ways, it's not the measures implemented in the US, but the manner of it, the speed. I think European politics is in some ways more traditional in that sense, the respect for structures, organizations, constitutions. The US, the media, I think, again, you have to remember media ownership is a global thing. And so you've seen, News Corp and the media, Murdoch empire, you've seen other global media outlets struggling in some ways to cover this. The knee-jerk would be to be populist, be very critical of the US, etc. I think they've tempered their coverage somewhat, have struggled to find new angles. I would hate to be a print media columnist at the moment because the world is moving so fast. So anything you've written on Monday morning, it's irrelevant by Monday afternoon.
Yeah, good point.
But also, the thing columnists I've always noticed love doing is you might think this is insane, but in fact, there's all this logic to it. And I think they've struggled to get that angles as well. Though on tariffs, I think there has been, over maybe the last week, a lot of attempts to counter the, say, tariffs bad, free market good. There have been people trying to find ways to suggest that economically tariffs can be justified in certain circumstances, dumping, etc., those sort of areas. So, yeah, tough environment for the media. Everything's changing very rapidly, and I don't think there's been a consistent outrage, certainly not from the global media.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So speaking of the media, I mentioned this in our pre-call. I saw a story on ABC News last night that said these companies said they will not have, but will raise prices in response to Trump's tariffs. And so it's just interesting going through this list. A couple of Chinese companies, Shein and Temu, they have both released statements saying that they would increase prices. Nintendo Best Buy, which I'm assuming is a US based company. That must be based in the US.
I think it is, but so many of its products are sourced from
Well, good point. Global supply chain. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it's not just overseas based companies, right? Hermes. Please tell me I pronounced that correctly. My wife would be ashamed of me if I did not.
I heard Hermes, but I used to go to Hermes.
Yeah.
Ailman. You don't
Hey, it's
pronounce the
Hermes.
S at the end, guys.
Hermes, I don't know. AutoZone and Ferrari. So if Ferrari is now going to cost more,
Well,
you
that's
know,
just
now
what
we
need
now
right
we
now.
can't afford it, Jeff. Those are just some examples. So it makes me think, you know, when you have to announce a price increase, what does that do to your overall marketing and communications? It must have an effect. Yeah, I assume that if you're announcing this publicly and within the context of a very public situation, what are the things that you have to do differently from a marketing and communications perspective? That article, Jeff, you sent us over the weekend, I thought was really good about the internal audience. You know, you have to make sure your employees understand this is coming before it goes public, before you announce the increase in prices. You also, and you know, I mean, we've been through, Jeff, you and I and Malcolm, I'm sure, have been through so many crises. You know, what's the playbook, right? I mean, it's inform your employees, but not just your own people. You have to let, in advance, you have to let your suppliers know. You have to let your customers know. You have to let your strategic partnerships know. All of these things should be going out in advance before things are announced publicly. But Malcolm, what do you think about that? I mean, what are some of the things that you either think that companies should do differently with marketing and communications, or maybe you've seen some examples of that already? I don't know.
I'm surprised individual brands are going out as early. I mean, I think if I was sitting with the CEO at the moment, I'd be saying, focus on your business, focus on the core things that we do, and work insofar as we can with our competitors, our industry bodies. You know, if Ferrari is going out there saying we're going to increase prices, the reality is that most European car manufacturers are going to be doing that in the US. That's what tariffs do. If I was advising CEOs, I'd be saying, how well engaged are we with our industry bodies? How well engaged are we with the European Union's trade representatives in DC? If I was a US company, how are we engaged at AmCham EU, the American Chamber of Commerce to the European Union? How well engaged are we with automotive manufacturers of the US in Europe? And I would be using those bodies to broaden the discussion away from individual companies and taking it to sector level, because you know the tectonic plates of politics and foreign trade are shifting, and the last thing you want to be is an individual company standing on one of those plates as they shift. There is strength, and there is common cause that limits your downside risk and yet allows you to communicate clearly without risking your brand reputation to quite the extent that going out there on your own does. That's where I would be. I think all these discussions need really good and effective trade bodies, industry bodies, working for their membership, personally.
I mean, that makes sense to me, Jeff. Looks like
from my perspective, so much of what's happening here in the US and the way the companies and individuals are reacting is fear of retribution. Easy for me to say, right? From the current administration. And that's why, Malcolm, certainly agree with you. to let the industry organizations be the spokespeople. Because true, you don't want to be an island out there as the tectonic plates shift, and there's a possibility of, retribution from the government, either from the president or from, that cost-cutting organization that's been set in place. So, no, I think that's very wise. Any other thoughts about the way the world's moving right now? This move towards nationalism?
There's a very good YouGov poll from end of March, and it was kind of looking at approval ratings of the US and European countries. It was interesting. The biggest, if you can imagine, pre-US elections, pretty much across Europe, there was a favorability attitude to the US of around high 40s, low 50s, somewhere around there. And it was, with a few points here, a few points there, pretty uniform. They've tracked it, and the most recent one I saw, unsurprisingly, maybe, biggest drop, Denmark, because you can't have the Greenland issue and not necessarily and see a consequential drop. So in the case of, favorability towards the United States, it dropped from 49% to maybe 19%, which is pretty sharp.
That's
drop. But that's kind of an outlier. And then you move into the main body of opinion. And the US is still polling favorability high 20s, low 30s across most of Europe, which, a third of the population is pretty favorable after everything that's happened. And it, was only up at 50 beforehand. So where you tend to see higher ratings for the US tends to be in those countries that have maybe greater empathy to the more populist right wing. So the lowest drop was in Italy, where Prime Minister Meloni was over last week in the States. She hosted J.D. Vance this weekend in Rome. And the Italians broadly, whether it's on the issue of defense spending, Ukraine, attitude to Trump, are nearly an outlier. They actually don't want to spend more on military, don't really want to be involved in Ukraine, and generally don't seem overly confirmed that Dolce Vita lives. Then you get sort of Germany and Britain in the middle, and then Denmark, more disapproval. My sense is there is a reasonable understanding that if one meets an American in the streets of Europe, that American has every biggest chance of being a non-supporter or supporter of the US administration. We know that from polling numbers. And there is a big chunk of people who, frankly, have forgotten the issues and will move on. And they will, we all of us necessarily eat, drink, think, politics, economics, marketing, communications. Most people don't. And most people are, I think this summer will be pleased to see tourists. As I said to them, I struggle to tell the difference between a Canadian and a US accent. If I do speaking English, believe me, French, Italians, Germans really struggle. So, it's not a mass wave about negativity, and it's not Europe against US. It doesn't feel like that here. It's not like that in the media at all. It's an atmosphere where deals have to be done, life goes on, and we have to make the best of it with the challenges that we face. And as those tectonic plates, that shift keeps happening because God knows it's not over yet.
No, you're absolutely right. It isn't over yet. And some strange dynamics. We've had a wonderful relationship with Canada my entire life.
Oh yeah.
Going back through my ancestors' lives. I mean, that's a wonderful relationship. And when this rift appeared, I think it was a shock to all of us, but also huge shock to the people in Canada. So just to try to explain, that's really hard.
I wish Caroline or Gelman, our producer, our unseen to the masses producer here.
And we love her, just so you know.
We,
She's
we,
fantastic.
we love Gelman, and Malcolm, we'll have to tell you another time why we're calling her Gelman. But her younger sister just spent the last 9 days in Italy with her in-laws and husband. And before she went, I was nervous. I admit it. I was nervous that my American daughter was going to Europe because I thought she might get harassed. Now she's going to Italy, but I think part of that is just parental paranoia, right? But part of that is Jeff, tell me what you think about this. There is you're pushing back against it in the sense that you're giving us your view of reality from there, but from here, a lot of us are assuming that everybody kind of hates us right now, right?
Yeah,
is that fair, Jeff?
I think it is fair. And just, for background for everyone, I have a son who teaches English in Spain.
Right.
And we visited him last year, and he said, "Oh, the view of the U.S. is not very favorable, at least here." And he talked about it. He gets an earful wherever he goes. "Oh, you're an American." I think sometimes he pretends to be a Canadian. So yeah, it's a tough atmosphere. In Portugal too, they kind of felt the same way. So I've heard that. At the same time, a lot of people just don't care because it doesn't impact them directly, or at least it doesn't now, but it probably will in the future. So
yeah. Well, then, by the way, I asked her when she got back, did anybody harass you because you're American? And she said, no, somebody made a comment that, oh, typical American only speaks English. But I said, well, I went to Europe for the first time a long time ago, and I heard that then. So I don't think that has anything to do with the tariffs.
I think it simply reinforces in some ways what you'd always hope tourists are, wherever we go, that we're culturally sensitive. If you think your baggage is up on the weight limit for getting on the plane, maybe put the MAGA hat back and, don't take it with you. I think if you're sensitive and you're sensible, just as we would be if we went to Dubai or we went to Saudi or we went to Jordan or, wherever it may be, it's just the same here. Be sensitive, be intelligent, be interested in the local culture, ask people how they feel. Don't be ashamed to be who you are. At the end of the day, it keeps going. And, hopefully we can all keep traveling freely around the world.
Well, one would hope. I wasn't sure I was going to the French Open, but I'm going now, Jeff. You want to go to Paris for the French?
Oh, I'd love to, but I've got obligations here, John. I've got obligations. I'm not sure what they are, but I have obligations.
I want to say this is the 9-year anniversary of Brexit. I want to say that was 2016. Does that sound right? It was either that or 2017. I think it was
the vote, the actual process to extricate ourselves and get a deal has only been in place, 4 years now. It took a long time.
Right. It took several.
So we said we're leaving, and then getting the divorce settlement done, inevitably involved a lot of lawyers and a lot of hard time.
Yes.
We got there in the end.
Lawyers like situations like that. Yeah, for sure. So, and it's a fascinating point to me, what you brought up, that there's strength in numbers, that you were saying that the European Union, the EU, has power in being able to negotiate as a bloc, as a large bloc, whereas the UK is kind of by itself now, by choice of its own voters. And by the way, that's something we should never forget in the United States either. This was the vote of the people. Jeff and I are thinking everybody hates us. Well, It's not like Trump was voted in by a minority of people. He was the clear winner. And so it kind of is what it is. But I wonder, I mean, from a UK perspective, does this, given your view, which makes sense to me that they now have to manage this as a small independent block as opposed to part of a larger one, does that embolden within the UK the anti-Brexit forces? Is there any sort of "I told you so"? We shouldn't be going about this on our own?
Yeah, I think it's was for me personally embarrassing. I'm not particularly, I can't recall an occasion in British foreign policy during my lifetime where we have gone quite so cap in hand and on bended knee to the extent we did. And you know, that's real politique. That is where Britain finds itself. And I wasn't overly comfortable with that, but it's what had to be done. The UK economy needs growth. It will have problems if there's a major stalling of the economy because of tariffs. So we have to plead for a special deal, or Britain has to plead for a special deal. Is it slightly embarrassing? Yeah. You know, frankly, you look at that Oval Office shot of the envelope and you're cordially invited to afternoon tea with the king. It's a bit, you know, embarrassing from a country that I knew when I grew up. Just to explain a little bit, if it's worth it, the problem Britain has is that it also needs to improve the trade deal it did with the European Union at the time of Brexit in 2020 to 2021. And in terms of scale, Europe is twice the size as a trading partner as the US. It's not perfectly binary, but there is a real risk that in coming to an agreement with the US, you make a trade deal with the European Union even harder.
Right.
And there is also talk at the moment of potential poison pills, where to get a trade deal with the US will require trade restrictions on the EU.
Wow.
So Britain is having a real juggle. The timescales are very close. They're talking the next few weeks for a potential US trade deal. They're talking maybe September for a European Union one. The one that really matters the most is the European Union. But the one that's coming up first is the US one. So Britain's having to be a bit clever about how it does it. And there is a chance that doing one deal with the US could undermine one with the European Union. So yeah, it's all to play for and potentially quite nuanced. The one that has, throughout my lifetime, stopped a trade deal with the US is the major, huge issue of chlorinated chicken. That will raise your eyebrows, but Britain has never, and the European Union have never been able to get a good trade deal with the US because Europe won't admit chlorinated chickens, which is something you have in the US. It is, you know how something becomes totemic? Is in the scheme of things, it's unimportant. But US, European consumers or British consumers, will they accept chlorinated chickens? There's outrage. If you ask American farmers, why can't you export your chickens to the UK and Europe? It's chlorinated chickens. Apparently that's off the table for the deal with Britain at the moment. But that's how trade deals get. They get caricatured as like, it's all about chlorinated.
That is the term of the day to me.
Chlorinated chicken.
Chickens.
Go and have a look. Google chlorinated chickens.
But now I know why certain chicken tastes like it does.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so a chlorinated chicken. A chlorinated chicken is when you wash chicken meat in chlorinated water, to ensure that the meat has low levels of harmful bacteria, viruses, and other contaminants and is safe to eat.
Fair enough.
Interesting.
Fair
They
enough.
are-
And we do try to be as nonpartisan as possible on the offense here. But isn't the chlorine in the water thing part of what RFK Jr. is talking about?
Now, he was talking about fluoride.
Oh, chloride, or of chlorine, fluoride. Is there such a thing as fluoridated chicken?
It helps their
The
teeth.
kind.
Those hens' teeth are improved by fluoride in the water. You believe
chicken
that? You believe
Beefs are
that?
so nice. Yeah.
Oh, there's too much fluoride in that chicken.
Yeah.
I knew it tasted weird. Boy, this is fascinating. Here's one for you. I guess I know what you're going to say, Malcolm, but I guess if I am listening to this and I'm a CMO for an American-based company that has a product, maybe has a global product launch coming up, doesn't sound to me like there's any reason not to go ahead with what would be my normal global rollout of whatever this product and service might be.
Yeah, I guess so. I would agree with that. Allowing that your product, you're probably sensitive to market dynamics and individual markets. It's not a one size fits all. You understand that different markets are behaving in different ways and different attitudes in those markets. I would come back and to the role of the industry association as well. Make sure you've got the guys who understand the local market, of which you're a member probably.
Oh, yeah.
Engaged and understanding, so there's no hiccups in the road. No, my firm view at times of crisis is keep running your business. More than anything, don't be sidetracked. If you can, keep going, focus on your business. Keep yourself out of the political arena. Just keep doing what you do for your employees, for your supply chain, for your stockholders, all of those people. Keep doing what you do, but be sensitive to the environment you work in and get best advice from people locally.
I mean, that's great advice. Are we ready, Jeff, for my prop?
I think we are. Malcolm, are we ready for John to roll out whatever
I'm bracing
prop is?
myself.
Yeah.
I've been dying for that.
Go
ahead.
On
John.
the offense, viewers know that I like to have a prop. We've terrorized Malcolm up front that I'm going to do something silly here. It doesn't have anything to do with chlorinated or fluoridated chicken. I have brought with me a worthless trinket that I obtained at Le Bourget, the airport in France, in 1999 at the Paris Air Show. And it is it says the spirit, I don't know if you can see it, the spirit of St. Louis, which was Lindbergh's plane. And as we all know, he left, I assume it was New York. I think it was New York. And he flew across the Atlantic, landing at Le Bourget outside of Paris. And in doing so, became the first American to fly solo across the Atlantic. And I guess this is a
what is it?
It's a pilot's alarm clock. And
wow.
So, you're up there.
It's
It's you and the birds up there, and this is a small device you could use to, I suppose, make sure you didn't fall asleep as you flew to the Atlantic. But I remember being at that air show in 1999 and realizing where I was, and I had grown up being a huge fan of Lindbergh and that flight. And it was a real cool thing for me to be at that airport. And the Paris Air Show is coming up again. It is, I know they alternate between Farnborough in the UK and the Paris Air Show. I'm pretty sure Paris is odd years. So it should be coming up in a couple of months, probably, I mean, less than 2 months, usually early to mid-June.
I went in the mid-2000s. and really enjoyed Le Bourget. It's like an old airport. I'm sure they must use it in films. It's sort of,
I'm sure they do.
you know, those landings that you see in film set in the 20s and 30s. It feels like a proper old airport. But yeah, big fan of it.
Yeah, no, I've kept this in my home office ever since, and one of the reasons this is the year before I joined Jeff at EDS, but the reason we were there, I was working for Honeywell at the time, and actually I had worked for Allied Signal. We acquired Honeywell, although we took their name because they had the bigger brand. We announced the merger / acquisition the week before the Paris Air Show, and then we all got on the flight and flew to Paris and did a big thing at the air show to promote the acquisition. And it was a big deal and exhausting, but one of those kind of once in a lifetime career situations you don't soon forget. But anyway, and then when I got this off the shelf in my home office, I realized you got the Brexit 10-year thing at the beginning of the Brexit thing, 10 years next year. But believe it or not, it's in 2 years. It will be the 100th anniversary of that flight. It was May 21, 1927. So we're going to have an anniversary here coming up. I'm assuming they'll do something at Le Bourget.
Well, if you want to come over, you know where I am.
You got vacant bedrooms?
Well,
no vacant rooms. We have space.
He has extra space, and he's surrounded by world-class Chardonnay.
Incredible. What a life.
I'm thinking taking on the offense on the road, Jeff, and doing a podcast from Burgundy in the summer of 27.
Well, it beats going to Waco.
Yeah.
And it beats Dallas this summer, I'll tell you that.
Oh, it does. It does in a huge way.
Jeff, I will turn it over to you in a moment to thank Malcolm for his time. But Malcolm, thank you. I have really enjoyed our pre-calls. I've enjoyed this immensely. I've learned a lot, and I suspect that our viewers will as well. Thank you for taking the time. We really, really appreciate it. Jeff?
Yeah, Malcolm, that was really enlightening. So I'm really glad you could join us today. Hopefully we'll keep in touch and keep on getting your point of view on these things that are impacting our world. But it's been very, very valuable, and we thank you for being here today.
We should thank you guys, because to be honest, the best years of my career were at EDS and working with Jeff, and I think everyone who was touched by EDS comes away with a common sense of what it takes to be in business and be in comms. And no, they were the best years. So joining you and having a chance to re-engage both of you is fabulous. And
no, I agree with that perception. Those were my best years as well.
Well, Jeff, you know what we haven't done yet? We haven't explained. I mean, it's clear why we would want Malcolm on this, but we haven't really explained the part about how he's part of the Clients First Network. We have 2 requirements. If you want to be part of the Clients First Network, we have now almost 50 people in our network. And so Jeff and I promote ourselves as the founding principals of the firm, which we are, and we feel good about our experience and the expertise we bring, but in the end, we're only 2 people. We have a network of about 50 people, and there are 2 requirements to be in the network. Number 1 is you have to be somebody who we have worked with before, and as a result, trust your work, respect your work. We do have some exceptions of people we haven't worked with before, but we know enough about them that we feel good about having them in the network. But the second rule, Jeff, is the more important rule. And you have to be someone with whom we would like to have a beer. And so, Malcolm, I would love to have a beer with you, not to mention a little Chardonnay.
That's where I was going, a little Chardonnay. Maybe
Chardonnay.
Whatever.
Right? Malcolm's a great example of the talent we have throughout the network. And
the wisdom. and the wisdom.
And the wisdom. And he's also an example of people we have in our network outside of the United States. We are building an international network. Most of the people in our network are in the US, but we have a handful of people outside. And this is a good example today of the value that we gain, and hopefully our clients gain by having this type of wisdom available to us. So Jeff, back to you to close.
I agree with everything that John has said. Malcolm, your insights were fantastic. And I'll bring it to a close. We really appreciate the support of all you folks out there. The numbers viewing us seem to grow every week and or every 2 weeks. So we appreciate that. We hope it keeps on going. I hope you've had a great holiday season with Easter and Passover. Keep us in mind, clientsfirst.mc.com. And please view us on our different social networks. We are everywhere. So again, thank you. Thank you for making us global. John, thank you for making us likable. And we'll see you again very soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Malcolm.
I know.